Chapter 6 Vallaki.
"Granny Morgantha," Navarra said, eyeing the road. "There are children crying upstairs," Rowan told them.
"We'll take care of them later." Henry held his sword close and hid behind the front door. Navarra and Irina took their places on the other side, waiting to pounce when the mother hag walked in.
"She stopped,"
Navarra said, watching from a window.
"I think she suspects. Wait, she's gone!"
The hag had vanished on the spot, leaving the deserted pie cart in the middle of the road. The raven they had seen earlier squawked, flapping its wings frantically near the cart, then flew off toward the wood.
"She must be invisible,"
Navarra said. Then she drew open the door and ran out, dashing after the cawing bird. Henry ran behind her. "Look! There!" He pointed to the raven. The black bird was a frenzy of noise and feathers hovering in the air. The bird seemed to be grabbing at something with its talons. Navarra took aim and felt the familiar surge of energy flow through her palm. The green blast hit right beneath the raven, revealing a loathsome purple hag.
"Take her down!"
Navarra yelled. "What do you think I'm here for?" Henry said, charging to engage the hag. Granny put up a fight, and at one point even threw Navarra to the ground with a spell, but the fiend was no match for the knight's blade and the warlock's magic together. Henry was about to deliver the coup de grace when Navarra held up her hand.
"Wait! I need to ask her something."
She leaned down and grabbed the disgusting creature by the collar. Remembering Keithland's other name, she demanded,
"Where is Mother Night?"
The hag spat blood in her face.
"Ha! She is wherever you call her name."
Navarra shook the hag.
"She must reside somewhere. A house, a cave, a shrine. Where?"
The hag let out a gurgling moan, and her head slumped back. Disappointed, Navarra dropped the corpse.
"We should search the body,"
Navarra said, going through layers of tattered clothing. Navarra threw bits of trash, trinkets, and old bones, finding nothing of interest, until Henry grabbed her hand. She was getting ready to toss a black crystalline stone. Henry took the stone. "This is a gem. I might be able to use it for a healing spell."
"That wicked-looking thing?"
"Some spells need gems in order to work."
"I know that,"
Navarra said.
"But I always thought you needed rubies or diamonds and such. What kind of gem is that, anyway?"
"I'm not sure, but it might come in handy later." When Navarra and Henry walked back to the others, the helpful raven looked down at them, perched on a tall monolith. The stone was one of 12 that stood in a grassy circle. It reminded Navarra of the Eladrin standing stones back home, but much larger. She left Henry and walked into the ring of rocks that spanned about 30 feet in diameter.
"Thank you,"
she said to the raven. She took a step closer, placing her hand on a stone and feeling worn carvings engraved in the rock. She continued to look up at the bird.
"Who are you?"
The raven cocked its head, and then flew away. Something crunched beneath Navarra's foot as she left the circle. She bent down. There, pressed into the muddy ground, were a set of small white pebbles. She picked up a handful and looked at them closely. They were children's teeth. She threw them down and wiped her hand on her skirt, then hurried away. Back at the windmill, Rowan and Irina had discovered precious cargo locked in a crate.
"This is Lucian and Myrtle,"
Irina said.
"Their parents sent them away with Granny."
"Sold them," she mouthed to Navarra. The two children looked up at Navarra with gaunt faces, hollow eyes, and dirty clothes. They were each nibbling on bits of bread and dried fruit that Irina and Rowan had given them from their rations.
"We told them we'll take them to Vallaki," Rowan said.
Navarra knelt, taking each child's hand.
"Would you like to see something neat?"
They both gave slight nods. Herkomoid came out from behind Navarra's hair and hopped to the floor. The little boy gave a yelp.
"It's all right,"
Navarra said with a soothing tone. Herkomoid stretched his wings, held his head high, and pranced around the children.
"Can I pet him?"
the girl, Myrtle, asked. Navarra smiled.
"Of course."
The girl touched Herkomoid's head with one finger and squealed in delight. Henry came into the room with another child clinging to his leg. "I thought I'd check the pie cart. Found this guy stashed inside."
"Freak,"
said Irina, recognizing the boy and taking his arms.
"I knew Granny Morgantha was no good, but this—"
She shook her head.
"Henry, Navarra," Rowan said, "you should come up and see the second floor."
Rowan led them to the millstone, or rather, the bone grinder. Henry put a hand to his mouth. Stacked near a cluster of skulls were sacks labeled flour. Navarra said nothing, thankful that she had never tasted the hag's children pies. That evening they took Irina's precaution and slept inside the windmill.
"We can never be too careful with vampires about,"
she had said when Navarra suggested they spend their night under the stars. They decided to take watch regardless. The only place in the windmill that wasn't ruined by water or bloodstains and bone flour was the gear room on the 4th floor. When it was Navarra's turn to guard, she summoned Gostomir and spoke to him quietly. Gostomir pretended to hop over each of the sleepers in the room while she told him about the hags. Navarra was about to bring up Keithlin when Henry started muttering and twitching in his sleep. At that, Gostomir vanished, leaving behind no trace that he was ever there. In the morning, when Navarra asked them if they had slept well, neither Henry nor Rowan answered.
"Bad dreams?"
Navarra guessed. Henry ran his hands through his hair. "I think I'm almost as tired as I was before I went to bed." Not wanting to spend a moment longer at the mill, they set off for Vallaki. Rowan transformed into a grey horse and carried Irina and one of the children. Juniper and Snowflake each carried their masters and a child. It was a 20-mile ride before the old Svalich road led them to a set of ironclad gates in the middle of a tall wooden wall. Planted in the ground by the road outside the gates were a half-dozen pikes topped with wolves' heads. A pair of shadowy figures stood atop the parapet. Seeing the newcomers, one of the figures leaned over the bulwark, holding a spear in one hand and a wooden shield in the other.
"Stand back, strangers! Come no further!"
The riders halted. The other guard leveled his crossbow at them.
"Are you friends of the devil Strahd?"
"No," Henry said.
"We don't take in any Vistani or witches. You're not one of them, are you?"
"Neither,"
Navarra said, unsure what they meant by witches. The man with the spear came down from the wall and approached them cautiously.
"Do you have any proof of your loyalties?"
Navarra was puzzled about what might qualify as proof.
"I see you're protected,"
Irina said, pointing to the garlic clove around the man's neck. She dug in her pocket and pulled out her own clove.
"Here's proof that we're no friends to vampires."
She held up the garlic in triumph. Remembering that Ismark had given the smelly tokens to each of them, Navarra and the others held out their cloves as well. The guard examined the garlic by giving it a good sniff. When he stopped at Henry, He gaped at the holy symbol engraved on the pommel of his sword.
"You're worshippers of the Morning Lord. Let them in," he called to the other guard.
They entered a wide cobblestone street, passing grey houses on either side. Though the sagging roofs and peeling paint were a sombre sight, these homes were not as shabby as the ones in the village of Barovia.
"We need to find a nice warm inn," Navarra said.
"One that will hopefully accept all of us," Henry said, reminding them of the last tavern they had visited. A few townsfolk stopped to stare as the newcomers rode into the town square. The villagers looked on with plastered smiles on their faces.
"What's wrong with them?" Henry asked in a hushed tone.
Frayed garlands and painted pots, filled with small dead flowers, decorated the square. At the north end stood a row of stocks holding captive several men, women, and children, wearing crude plastered donkey heads. In the center of the square, drawing water from a crumbling stone fountain, peasants in patchwork clothes eyed the riders suspiciously. But most still managed to force a smile. All around the square were posted proclamations. "Come one, come all, to the greatest celebration of the year, the Wolf's Head Jamboree. Attendants and children required. Pikes will be provided. All will be well. The Baron." They were about to ask someone for directions to the inn when they saw a tall, bald, broad-shouldered man in livery ordering 2 guards to tear down the posters. One of the guards came near the newcomers, staring at them while he ripped off the old proclamation and posted a new one. This new declaration stated, "Come one, come all, to the greatest celebration of the year, the Festival of the Blazing Sun. Attendants and children required. Rain or shine. All will be well. The Baron." Noticing the strangers, the bald man came up to them.
"You're not from around here," he stated in a gruff voice.
"We're new in town," Henry said. "You look like someone in charge. Could you tell us where there's lodging?"
"I'm the sheriff, Isaac Strahd.
He stopped when he saw Irina. His mouth twitched into an odd, rapacious grin that stole across his face. He put an unnatural clawed hand on his belt, where a single-bladed axe was nestled, and puffed out his large chest.
"And who might you be?"
he asked, leering at her. "I'm Henry Gibson," Henry said, leaning toward the man.
"Is that so? What about you?"
Isaac Strahd continued fixing his gaze on Irina.
"My name is Sophie."
Irina avoided the penetrating look.
"And these are orphans."
She pointed at the children.
"Sophie,"
Isaac repeated. His upper lip curled.
"I'm Navarra,"
Navarra said, holding out her hand.
"It's nice to meet you, Sheriff Isaac. I used to be a sheriff's deputy myself."
Isaac paid her no notice, letting her hand hang unwelcomed.
"There's a tavern at the next intersection along the North Street," he said. "But as strangers, you'll need to register at the burgomaster's if you plan on staying in Vallaki."
He finally glanced at the others, and his face went sour.
"But you all don't look very happy. Do you know what happens to those who aren't happy?"
He gestured to the people in the stocks.
"There's a law about being happy?"
Navarra ventured to ask.
"By decree of the burgomaster, Baron Vargas Vallakovich, every person in Vallaki must be happy. It keeps the devil away, you see."
"And those people," Henry pointed to the prisoners with the donkey heads, "weren't happy?"
"Not happy at all."
Isaac said, through a fake smile and gritted teeth.
Well, you can count on us to stay happy, Navarra said, smiling.
I should hope so.
Isaac looked again at Irina. Thank you, said Henry, gesturing to the others that they should leave. We'll make sure to register with the Baron. They left Isaac staring after them. This is a strange town, Henry said, once they were out of earshot from the sheriff.
I'd like to go to the inn before we register, Irina said. These poor children are tired from the long journey, and they weren't in great shape to begin with.
The little girl sitting in front of Irina nodded in and out of sleep. Henry looked down at the tired boy in front of him. I agree. We'll see the burgomaster tomorrow. I wanted to ask that sheriff if there's a place we can take the children, but I don't trust him. Grey smoke was issuing from the chimney of a large 2-story wooden building. A flock of ravens crowded the shingled rooftop, and a painted sign hung over the front door. The sign read, Blue Water Inn. Navarra conjured up a bit of magic and transformed her pointed ears into rounded human ones.
Wow, Irina said. I didn't know you could do that. I can change my whole appearance if I need to. I could look exactly like Henry, or Rowan, or you. But I'll change the ears for now, just in case.
Irina looked around.
I don't see any Vistani. They're the only ones prejudiced against elves that I know of.
I don't want to take any chances either, Rowan said, tying a cloth around her ears as a headband. The delightful smell of roasted meat and hot stew greeted them as they entered the inn. A middle-aged man stood behind a long bar, talking with 2 young boys. Seeing the newcomers, the man said, Evening, strangers. What can I do for you? They all went over to the counter. Henry asked for a room, and if there was a place in town that took in orphans. We found these 3 children on the road coming here, he said. They told us their parents gave them away. Henry, Irina, and Rowan had ruled that they keep silent about the hags. Navarra, on the other hand, wanted to shout it to the whole world so that everyone would know what wicked monsters they really were. It took a lot of badgering from the others, who used words like discretion and prudence to keep Navarra quiet. While Henry talked with the barkeep, who introduced himself as Erwin Martikov, Navarra whispered to Irina.
You know what I'm going to do?
Take a hot bath if they have one? Irina guessed. Navarra sniffed her underarm.
I do smell bad, don't I? A bath would be nice. But no. What I want to do is find someone. A man. I'm going to bat my eyelashes and toss my hair just so.
Navarra flipped her hair in an exaggerated way.
That sounds silly. I thought it was called flirting, Navarra asked. Besides, I've seen the women in Harrington do it. I've never done it before, and I thought I should give it a go. You can if you want to, Irina said with an amused smile. But I don't think you'll need to try very hard to get a guy to notice you.
Navarra surveyed the room. On the other end of the bar was a dark-haired man playing a melancholy tune on a lute. The instrument's mournful crooning matched the man's heavy-browed, brooding face.
Handsome, but way too dark and foreboding,
thought Navarra. Sitting at a table near the minstrel was a man with a graying beard. A dark-skinned woman sat at the table across from him, holding a pet snake. The bearded man touched the woman's arm tenderly as they talked in low whispers.
Interesting, but taken.
There was a colorfully dressed man with an enormous feathered hat that hid half his face.
except I can still see his large nose, thought Navarra, passing him over.
At another table sat two rough-looking men wearing wolf pelts and sour expressions.
Nope.
Then she saw him. He sat alone at a table strewn with papers, and was scribbling away on one of them with pen and ink. Navarra left her friends at the bar and strode over to the handsome young man, trying to keep herself from skipping. She pulled up a chair across from him and sat down with poise.
"Hello there."
She gave a sultry smile and winked playfully. He looked up from his work and blinked in pleasant surprise.
"Hello."
"I'm Navarra,"
she said, gently brushing a lock of hair behind her ear to reveal an elegant neck.
"I hope I'm not interrupting you from your work."
No, not at all."
He stacked his papers and put away his quill.
"I was just working on my latest novel."
"Oh, you're a writer. What do you write about?"
"I'm romance novelist. Specifically vampire romance. But they're nothing great, just something that sells."
He smiled coyly and rubbed the back of his neck.
"Vampire romance, eh?"
"It pays. People love them, really. Have you heard of High Stakes Romance at Midnight? Or Mist of Love?"
Navarra shook her head.
"What about Gone by Dawn? There's also Love Bites, and the sequel, Love Sucks."
Navarra let out a laugh.
"Clever, but no, I haven't heard of them."
The titles sounded like trite, frivolous stories.
"So, are you staying here at the inn, Mr.?"
"Forgive me, I'm Vasili von Holtz."
He gave a sweet smile and held out his hand. Navarra shook it and smiled back, admiring how his warm chocolate eyes matched the color of his hair.
"I have an apartment here in town, but I like coming to the inn to work. Their wine is pretty good, too."
He tapped an empty wine glass.
"Let me buy you a drink."
"Thanks."
He went to the bar and brought back a glass for Navarra and another for himself.
"Red Dragon Crush is the best wine around," he said. "Those are your friends over there?"
He inclined his head to the others, who were talking to Irwin and a woman with feathers in her hair.
"Yes, they are,"
Navarra said, taking a sip of wine. Henry and Irina were introducing the orphans to the woman, and Rowan sat alone at another table, scanning the tavern's occupants. Her forlorn expression seemed to mirror the brooding musician a few tables away.
"Where are you from, Navarra?" Vasili asked. "What brings you to Barovia?"
Navarra told him about Harrington and about trying to find a hag who claimed to be a goddess.
"Now I'm here in Vallaki just helping a friend."
She looked back at Irina and hoped this town would be a good home for her, a place of refuge.
"Vasili, what do you know about the Lord of Barovia?"
"Count Strahd?"
His eyes went wide with fear and awe. He leaned in.
"They say he's a vampire, but I've never seen him. Some say he's so powerful that he can make the sun disappear with a snap of his fingers. Some say they've seen him flying across the sky on a flaming stallion. Others say he can appear anywhere he wishes, completely invisible."
Navarra was leaning on the edge of her seat when Vasili whispered,
"He might even be right here with us in this room."
Navarra jumped. The author laughed and took another gulp of wine.
"Ha ha! I don't know if any of that's true, but it makes a good story."
Navarra sat back in her chair and chuckled nervously.
"Well, he's a vampire, all right. I've seen him in person."
"Really? What was he like?"
"Terrible. Horrible. And not half as charming as the first vampire I met."
"Who was that?"
"His name was Ineka Suffocan. I met him when I was working as a deputy on a missing person case in Harrington. When I told him I needed to attend the Earl's ball for the case, he asked to go with me as my date.
You've been on a date with a vampire? This I've got to write.
He pulled out his quill, dipped it in the inkwell, and began scratching on fresh paper.
The ball was great fun, but as it turned out, Ineka was the pirate mastermind at the heart of the whole case.
She went into some detail, waving her arms in large gestures.
What about this Ineka? Who was he aside from a charming villain?
He's the captain of a pirate ship, the Pale Prow. He even asked me to join his crew after I had found out he was a vampire. Of course, when I said no, he charmed me. I would be on his ship right now if it hadn't been for Sheriff Eric. Still, he was devilishly good-looking.
Vampires always are, Vasili said with a wink. Henry cast his divine sense. He felt the spiritual energies coursing through the taproom, hidden from everyone but himself. He never thought he'd use this spell in his life, but ever since meeting Strahd von Zarevich, he'd been casting it often. The spell allayed his fears as the wave of magic told his senses that there were no undead beings in the tavern. No vampires. "Thank you, Danica," Henry said to Mrs. Martikov.
"It's no problem,"
she said, watching her 2 young boys talk to the 3 orphans as they ate their stew.
"I'll bring the children to St. Andrew's after they finish their meal. Father Lucian has the church open day or night to anyone in need."
When Danica turned away, Irina said to Henry,
"I'd like to go there tomorrow. Father Donovich said the church in Vallaki is consecrated by the bones of a saint. A vampire can't come near. Can't even charm someone standing on holy ground."
"That's a great idea, Irina," Henry said. He heard laughter coming from a table across the room, and saw Navarra talking with a stranger. "Let's go meet Navarra's new friend," he said. "Rowan, you want to join us?" The druid started, and hopped off her stool.
"And that's why I always carry one with me," the stranger was saying.
"Oh, Vasili, you're too much," Navarra laughed. "Hi there, Henry. Meet Vasili von Holtz, novelist."
"Nice to meet you," Henry said.
"Vasili was just telling me the different precautions he takes to check for vampires. He was saying that he carries a hand mirror with him wherever he goes."
"I like to check people to make sure they have a reflection," Vasili said, reaching into his pocket. "Want to see it?"
"No," Rowan said abruptly. Everyone turned to look at her.
"I mean, you don't need to do that. Henry has magic that can detect if someone is a vampire."
"You do?" Irina asked him.
Sorry," Navarra interjected. "I forgot to introduce everyone. Vasili, meet Rowan."
Navarra gestured to the wide-eyed elf.
"She's weird at times. And this is, Sophie." She pointed to Irina.
"It's a pleasure to meet you all," said Vasili.
"Hey, would everyone like to dance? There's a musician here. We could get him to play us a song."
"I'm sorry, but I'm too tired for all that," Henry said with a yawn. "I'm heading to bed."
"Me too," Irina said. "We all need a good night's sleep," agreed Navarra.
"What about tomorrow night?"
Vasili asked. "That could be nice," Irina said. "What do you think, Henry?"
Henry shrugged his shoulders. "Sure."
"How about you, Navarra?" Vasili asked. "Would you like to be my dance partner tomorrow?"
"Absolutely."
"Maybe you and I could have dinner, too."
"Definitely."
Vasili smiled from ear to ear.
"Great! It's a date!"
They paid 1 electrum piece for their room. It was tidy and narrow, but still fit 4 beds. Navarra was stowing her pack in a locker at the foot of her bed when Henry came up behind her. "I think I should go look for Whiskers," he said. "She was just with us a moment ago. I don't know why she would wander off like this."
"Stay here and get some sleep," Navarra told him. "Don't worry about Rowan. She can take care of herself. Besides, she's probably in the stables talking with the horses. But I'll stay up and watch for her if you like. I don't need to sleep half as much as you two." She pointed at him and Irina, who was fluffing a pillow. "All right," Henry said, claiming a bed and taking off his armor. Once Henry and Irina were asleep in their beds, Navarra lit her candle. Whoosh! Gostomir appeared.
"Oh, where are we this time?"
he said, tapping his fingers together and looking around the room.
"The Blue Water Inn."
"Vallaki."
Navarra spoke quietly.
"Good. Now, did you—"
Realizing he was near an open window, Gostomir quickly floated to the other side of Navarra's bed and out of sight. Snowflakes trailed behind him.
"Did you say your phrase today?"
Navarra put her hand to her head.
"Oh, I forgot."
"You really need to remember to say those. But don't worry. I have a new phrase for you."
He adjusted his shoulders and held out his hands.
"First, you need to gasp."
Gostomir gasped.
Then you need to say, "Just as it was foretold."
Say it in a spooky way. Go on, try it.
Navarra gasped and attempted to sound like Madame Eva.
"Just as it was foretold."
Excellent.
Navarra smiled.
"You know, Gostomir, you're nothing like what I imagined the Prince of Winter should be."
Navarra sat on the bed while Herkomoid was pouncing at the Fae's bare feet.
"Tall, fair, and full of wit?"
Navarra laughed.
"You're all of those things. But really, you know what I mean. You're so full of life and cheer. You remind me more of spring."
"I am what I am. You can't judge a season by its temperature. Besides, I like bringing life to the cold. In winter, things may seem dead, but nothing good really dies."
Navarra scratched Herkomoid's chin.
"Navarra,"
Gostomir said, pretending to pat the pseudo-dragon.
"When we were at the windmill, you mentioned a group of standing stones."
"Yes, the raven who helped us catch the old hag."
"Never mind the raven."
He flicked his hand.
"What else did you find there?"
"Children's teeth," she said with a shudder. "I can only assume they were paid as an offering to Keithlin."
"Keithlin is called of the crooked teeth for a reason. Those poor children were likely used as sacrifices for a hag with delusions of grandeur. Keithlin is duping people into believing she's a goddess. Tut tut. Listen, those stones you found are not just stones. They are a fane, and they're very important. You need to consecrate them."
"Consecrate a fane? Isn't that something only priests do?"
"You have your friend Henry. I'm sure he could do it. Right now that fane is desecrated by Strahd, and he's using them to control the weather in Barovia."
"What?"
Navarra looked on in disbelief.
"That's why it's always overcast. He can't very well walk around in sunshine. He's a vampire. He'd get sunburn."
Navarra held up her hand.
"Wait a minute. I thought you didn't know anything about Strahd."
"I didn't think I did. But I know about fanes."
"You are a mysterious creature, Gostomir."
"Why, thank you."
He puffed out his chest and grinned.
"But why didn't you tell me all this back at the windmill? Those monoliths are over 20 miles from here."
"I didn't think of it at the time."
He scratched his head.
"Don't worry. You don't need to leave right away, but you do need to consecrate it as soon as you can."
So once we consecrate those standing stones, it will prevent Strahd from controlling the weather?
Not immediately. You actually need to consecrate all 3 fanes for the sun to shine again.
There are 3 sets of standing stones?
Gostamir nodded.
Where are the other 2?
I don't remember.
Gostamir.
Navarra punched a hand through his ghostly shoulder. I can't help it. It's been a long time since I've been in Barovia. But I'm sure you and your friends can find them.
I don't see how this helps me deal with Keithlin.
The fanes are important, Navarra. They're very important. Navarra sighed, but looked at her patron fondly.
I believe you, and I'll tell the others.
A mournful song was playing beneath their second-story window, and Navarra got up to listen. Outside, leaning against the stable's outer wall, was the gloomy lute-player from the tap-room. Navarra opened the window a crack to hear the singer's alluring, melancholy voice. The song told of a raven who was killed by her true love's hand. Navarra shivered, and Gostamir came up beside her and rested his weightless arms around her shoulders. Not too far away, nestled in the grass, a white cat was also listening to the wistful melody as it rose into the starless sky.